You're listening to the Flow Theory Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to the Flow Theory Podcast. Former Virginia football Cavalier Tim Smith, who also happens to be a Virginia high school football legend. Tim set the Southampton Road single season record for receiving yards, 1,687 yards in one season. Also had 24 touchdowns in 2008 for Oscar Smith. Absolutely ridiculous season, which, by the way, he topped off with 6 catches for 224 yards and 4 TDs in the state championship game for Oscar Smith. Absolutely ridiculous. And in 2013, he finished his career at Virginia ranked 9th in all-time receiving yards with 1,591 receiving yards in 2013. It's probably dropped a little bit since then. You're probably somewhere in the top 15, but still definitely one of the best deep threats in Virginia football history. Tim, thanks so much for coming on the show, my man.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, sounds good, my man. We'll get right down into it, Tim. One of the things I really like talking to all the guys about, and a big reason I started this podcast, was to talk to athletes about their moments of flow and being in the zone. Mike Vick, in his 30 for 30 documentary, he talks about moments where there was a moment where every guy was moving in slow motion, even though the play was really running at full speed. Talk to me about, were there moments like that for you, either in your Virginia career, high school career, or in the pros?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that comes, with a comfort level of knowing what you're doing, one, as a player. You always play faster when you understand the game. You understand everything that's going on around you. So there were quite a few times, and probably the slowest moment I had was when we played Florida State in 2011. I had a big catch down the middle. It just played out exactly how we pitched it and how we practiced it, which doesn't happen all the time, but when it do, it's like, okay, well, I've seen this play out 4 times already this week, and just to see it play out the exact same way in a game, that amazes me sometimes, definitely as a player and same as a coach now. Yeah.
Talk to me about that Florida State game a little bit, Tim. That was such an epic drive, and that final drive and that catch you had across the middle was honestly one of my favorite catches that you had in your career. You definitely made some more acrobatic catches than that one in your career, but that one was just so pivotal because the way Rocco fired that on the money across the middle on the road against Florida State, the first time Cavaliers ever beat Florida State on the road. Just a heart-stopping victory. I told Chris Bird I almost had a stroke after that game, and I'm sure you guys probably did on the sidelines and the rest of Virginia fans across the country as well.
No, absolutely, man. What a lot of people don't know, that was probably the most exciting, biggest atmospheric game I played in college, period. And at the beginning of the game, I always wore my visor, and I dropped the first pass that I literally could not see. Like, the way the lights were setting, and it was a hitch route on our sideline. The coach was like, "Hey, Tim," and I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. Hey, I took the visor off after that." And, we got right to it. But, it was definitely a different feeling, man. Even just getting into the locker room, you can hear everybody over top of your head. They have like a personal setup, so the walls are thin in that locker room. So, even before we even took the field, it was one of those feelings that, this was a big time game. And leading up to that last drive, man, it was just literally all the specialty plays that we had on our script week by week. They never all hit at the same time. And that was probably the only game that each one of those plays hit. Even the Perry Jones catch down the Willing up the sideline. Everything was just clicking to a point where, I was kind of amazed on, how the whole setup went. And I always was, a Bill Lazor guy, so I trusted him wholeheartedly. And, that helped build our confidence even more. And that drive, it was basically me against the middle linebacker, and that's what Coach said all week. Two high safeties, he's going to be dropping Tampa 2, you just got to beat him. And, as a receiver, once I get lined up, I look at my matchup, so I'm like, man, there's no way he's running with me. I'm not sure how big he was, but, probably 230, 240 mismatch. And, Rocco made a perfect throw. I had to, turn a little bit to make the catch, but, it was definitely much needed. And, it kept the drive going and kind of sealed it for us.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about, like, your guys' mindset in the huddle before that final drive, Tim, where you guys just like, we got this, boys, like, was there any sort of speech that Rocco gave in the huddle? Be like, we're winning this.
It wasn't, that year, I feel like we were such on the same page in the huddle with all 11. There wasn't too many rah-rah speeches. It was like, fellas, what we got to do, let's go. And, having those older guys in the huddle with Chris Bird, that always, mentored me as my playing career, I already knew what time it was. Leading up to that game, we was clocking win after win, so we were confident. It was a couple plays in the game where we knew that it was going to come down to us, even the Chase Minifield, catching, I can't think of the name.
Burt Reed.
We had caught Reed at the 2-yard line, and then we had to, stop them. It was stuff like that happens in the game where, this is our game, So when it came down to the last drive and the ball was in our hands, we knew we had to do. So it was a quiet huddle. We all looked at each other. Let's go. And, that's what we did, man. And it was exciting. And at the end of the game, all the field goal misses and all that stuff when it got a little hectic. But, that last drive, man, it was amazing.
Yeah, the field goals at the end were just so chaotic, man. Like, there was the one field goal, and then they redid it, and I'll never forget when that kick went over the upright. I got so pissed because I thought for sure it was in because it went right over the upright, and I was like, oh, my God. I felt like someone shot my dog, and then the refs signaled no good. I just couldn't even believe it, man. I was just in such a state of shock. That was undoubtedly one of the wildest finishes to a Virginia football game I'll ever see in my life.
Man, absolutely. I was probably after the first one, I was probably one of the first players to run off the field. Like, they had to come get me out of the locker room. I'm like, man, we're going back to Virginia with this win. And then when we came back and they had to kick it in, I'm like, man, listen, I don't know what's going on right now, but I was already on cloud 9 at that point after that drive. So, yeah, man, it was absolutely crazy.
Because, Dustin Hopkins, I mean, that Florida State team was a really, really good team. And, E.J. Manuel, I'll say this to anyone, E.J. Manuel was really, his whole career, quite honestly, was one of the more overrated quarterbacks I've ever seen. I mean, he had trouble throwing the ball and completing passes. E.J. is a super nice guy. No knocks on E.J. Manuel's character. I think if you want a CEO in your company, E.J. Manuel is your guy. But as a quarterback in the National Football League, I was shocked that he got drafted in the first round in the NFL draft. But quarterbacks in the NFL draft continue to get overdrafted, as evidenced by a guy like Justin Herbert this year. So it happens. But, you guys played just an incredible game to stick with it. And I knew once Perry Jones caught that TD in the side of the end zone with the safety and the linebacker converging at the same time, man, I was just like, the boys are coming to play tonight. And
absolutely
just had a great feeling about that game. Talk to me about the 2011 game at Maryland. You had 5 catches for over 100 yards. Chris Bird had over 100 receiving yards. Crazy stat about this game. You guys were the first Virginia football receiving duo with over 100 yards in the same game since Terrence Wilkins and Kevin Coffey did it in 1998 against Virginia Tech.
Yeah, so that game, man, coming into college, as a young guy from Virginia, Chris Bird was always looked up to him. He was a mentor, and we were like the same caliber guys, even down to play style. Like, we were both aggressive. You see us down there blocking DNs, cracking, linebackers. We were like the same, and that was always the mentality. Went into every game with it. Hey, let's kill them. It's me and you. Let's get to it. So that game was amazing, man. We started off hot. I want to say Perry started off with that long touchdown, and after that, we were just throwing the ball around, man, just having a field day. And, that was one of the games where that's close to home for me, being from Virginia. So I had a lot of my family. I want to say I might have like 15 tickets that game as minimum. And one of my closest friends that also played with me, Oscar Smith, Kerry Boykins, he went to Maryland. So we kind of had, a little competition going before the game even started. Like, man, listen, it's either I'm going to get it or you're going to get it. He actually had 100-something yards too. So it was kind of a good game for the both of us. But that was just one of those instances where I look back like, man, when we were clicking and rolling, man, we were doing it for sure.
Yeah, I think the offensive line that year was easily the best offensive line of this decade for Virginia football. That 2011 offensive line, such a talented group, tackle to tackle, with so much experience. And the second they started clicking, I feel like everything else just kind of fell in place.
Absolutely, pretty much. I was talking to Chris Bird about that this past weekend, and I was like, man, that's probably one thing that people do not talk about is that offensive line that we had that year. Like, even me just going into the huddle and looking around at everybody, standing 6'4", 6'5", I'm like, yeah, I feel protected, So you're down to, small things like that, man, tackle to tackle. I want to say that year, pretty much everybody ended up in the NFL, give or take one guy.
Absolutely, dude. And I just remember, God, Austin Patzer was one guy that really jumped out at me, but I just remember Rocco having all day to throw in the Peach Bowl, in the Chick-fil-A Bowl in Atlanta. Yeah. And man, I mean, that group to do that against Auburn. And I know Corey Lemonier was out that game, but that was still what a super, super talented group that was. Undoubtedly one of the best in Virginia football history. There's no question about that. Talk to me about the 37-yard TD pass you had from Perry Jones at Miami, which was another one of my favorite wins from that 2011 season.
Yeah, man. So I caught quite a few from Perry, even dating back to high school. And, that was just one of those plays where we were running the toss and running the zone so well, where people had to get a safety into the box for support. So after running it for, 2 weeks, everybody's like, all right, safety has to fly down to help. And it was basically my job. It was, one of the easy things I had to do was just bluff the block, run to the safety, toss him a little bit. Once you see him react, you react. So, coming off the ball, once I seen him react and seeing his eyes were down here, the safety didn't even look at me. He was just looking at Perry the whole time, which you would expect, knowing that that's one of our bread and butter plays. And once I saw him, he went down, I reacted. It was all about me making, the play then. But Perry had an arm. He always had an arm. So it wasn't, acrobatic catch, anything. He put on the money. And, that's what it was.
Yeah, that Miami game was epic. One of my favorite catches of yours, you had an epic catch against, was it William and Mary, where you trapped the ball on the back of the guy's helmet?
Yeah, and it should have been a touchdown, but he called me out as one.
Talk to me about that catch, man. That was that had to have been one of the best catches of your career, and I know you had an amazing one against Southern Miss that I want to talk about too.
Mm-hmm. The one against William and Mary, it was pretty much a tough matchup, and we had something to prove because the year before, William and Mary came in, they beat us pretty good, and the guy. B.W. Webb that was playing DB, he's actually from the Hampton Roads as well. So the year he had against us the year before, I want to say he had at least 2-3 interceptions. He just played out of his mind.
Oh, yeah. He had 2 pick sixes that game, bro. I was at that game.
It was absolutely crazy. So the following year, I'm like, man, listen, that's not happening. Ball going up, I gotta have it no matter where it is. No, if he does that twice in a row, there's something wrong. So, in that play, it was just one of those toss-ups. Because in practice, the receiver's like, man, throw it up, just give me a chance. And that's kind of what that play was. And, it was kind of me or nobody play. And actually, looking back at the picture of it, he had his arm in between. But, we practiced and we do the right bucket, working on strong hands and strong grip all day. So once it was in my hands, it was not coming out, no matter where the ball was. It was behind them, yeah. So I was holding on. Pretty much a dead life. I was hoping that, I'm pretty sure I broke the plane, but, they called me out and it would have been a great touchdown catch, but I'll take it as a 30-plus yard gainer.
Dude, that was an epic catch. You also had a crazy, I think it was a one-hander you had against some guy from Southern Miss, dude. Talk to me about that catch. I couldn't find the tape of that one for some reason on your draft highlight tape, but I know you had an epic catch against Southern Miss. It just jumps out in my head.
So Southern Miss, we played Southern Miss, I want to say twice. We played them at Southern Miss, I want to say my freshman year, and then they came up to Charlottesville. But that was always one of those games where, those guys were very chippy. I want to say when they came up to Charlottesville, the ref had to tell me a couple times at 8:20, hey, keep it together. I'm like, I'm trying to, but hey, I'm matching intensity out here. So, and he was going at me, especially I'm right back at him, So that was one of the games where, I had to talk a little more than I usually do, but with the talk, you got to be able to back it up too. So, on that play, I just had to make the play. You never want to be, one down or anything like that going against somebody else or breaking even. So that was my one-up on him after that. He shook my hand. Hey, man, good catch. I was like, okay. But the whole game, it was just back and forth trash. So. That's
funny, man. Talk to me about the diving catch that you had in the back of the end zone against VMI from David Watford. That was one of the better balls that David Watford threw during his career, dude. Put that one on the money, and you dove in the slid in the back of the end zone for that one.
Absolutely, man. So, they've always had a big arm. And, running that big post, you just got to let it ride. So all week, I'm like, man, look, if the safety not there, just throw it, I'll go get it. But the thing is, as a receiver, and that was a rainy game too, so it was a wet one. So the gloves and your hands and everything, playing against the elements, try to use your body a little bit depending on the catch radius and everything. And that was one of the ones where I was just trying to secure it. So I had to lay out just so, I could have a little extra shoulder pad, a cloth in there to make sure the ball was trapped in, man. And I literally slid across the goalpost and everything. But that was definitely one of those ones where I had to make the play. I've caught posts probably more than I caught anything my entire life, so I pretty much can run them, in the house, outside, right now, at any point in time, in the dark, lights off, it doesn't matter. So when the ball in the air, you just got to get it, man. And I definitely remember that one because I want to say it was one of the clips of the week before that game. So
it was like a ACC must-see play of the week.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
One thing I've always been curious, Tim, and I don't know if you ever had anyone ask you this, but especially for a deep ball receiver like yourself, were you ever concerned, going out of the back of the end zone, worried about hitting people? Because to me, I've always said that it's crazy the way they have so many people crowding like the end zone and stuff that they don't have more space. You know what I mean? For the players to run through the end zone. To me, it seems like a liability nightmare.
Definitely a liability for sure. I will agree with that. But the one thing I would say, because I've definitely caught a couple, and I'm like 3 yards from people, you know, whether it was security or medical people or just fans in general. But I always looked at it as least I have on equipment. So if I run into somebody, they'll catch it worse than me. So, you know, I try not to worry about it too much.
That's good, man. I'm just always curious about that, man. That's a random question. You know, I heard someone, it might have been Jamie Oaks, Wahoo 247. He asked you about playing with Sean Moore as your receivers coach. Dude, I want to hear about what it was like to catch passes from one of the greatest quarterbacks in Virginia football history. And for the record, if we're talking about one of the prettiest spirals I've ever seen in my life, Sean Moore is right up there with Warren Moon and the best of them as far as I'm concerned. God, that guy could spin an absolutely gorgeous deep ball.
Absolutely, man. That's my guy, Coach Moore, from, you know, a person-to-person standpoint, coach to player, you know, and after we still speak at least once or twice a month. And, you know, just to be able to have him as your coach, it was definitely like one of those surreal things where, like, this guy is a great. You know, he's a true legend, and I get to be with him every day. And he used to have us over once a week. You know, we'll have Thursday night dinner, you know, just all the receivers. And just to be around him and be able to pick his brain was just amazing. And just being able to catch passes from him. I try to do that a little too often to a point where he was like, hey, man, get on the jug. I'm like, Coach, I catch it from you. Like, it's different coming out of somebody's hand than it is coming out of the machine. I'm trying to get it as realistic as possible. But, you know, there wasn't too many drops in practice. And there was a lot of extra catches after practice for sure.
Yeah, man. Sean Moore could spin an absolutely gorgeous spiral. I mean, I got to go back a long time ago and watch the YouTube game of Georgia Tech and Virginia, and just watching his spiral, man. It's just a thing of beauty. Like a beautifully spun spiral is truly a work of art on the football field. And Sean Moore made spinning the football into a work of art. No question in my mind.
Absolutely.
Talk to me about your NFL career and your CFL career, Tim. I know you were with the Browns, the Seahawks, the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and the Edmonton Eskimos. So talk to me about your journey in the pros and what was that like? I want to hear, you got some good stories for me.
I might have a few. Might be good for you, but not for me. Nah, I'm just kidding. But, you know, going into, you know, professional sports in general, you really don't see the whole picture. You just want to get there. You don't see the politics and the business aspect of it until you get there, you know. So once, you know, the draft came, it was a hard process for me to figure out the whole agency thing, and I really didn't have any guidance. After I left UVA, Coach Moore got me in contact with a guy that he knew. And, you know, that's the guy I went with because, you know, I didn't know much about it. I just knew I wanted, you know, to play at the next level. I had, you know, pretty decent credentials. All I needed was opportunity. So after the draft, I want to say like 4 or 5 teams to call, and they wanted to bring me in. And at that point, as a free agent, you can kind of, you know, pick where you want to go to the camp at. So my agent had suggested I go to Seattle. You know, he had a connection there and whatnot. But I felt like at the time, honestly, I should either went to Carolina or Minnesota, who had both called as well, and had a need for receiver more so than Seattle, who just came off the Super Bowl, who still had Percy Harvin, and they just drafted a second-round guy and a third-round guy. So looking back at it, you know, knowing what I know now, I would have went, you know, a different route as far as that goes. But nonetheless, it was an opportunity because a lot of people don't get it at all. So, went down there, did my rookie mini camp. They didn't keep any other receivers, which was kind of already in my mind because of what they had and what they just drafted. So, I still took advantage of the opportunity, man. Had a great time down there. And it was great to see, I seen a post of Kenny Easley, and then it dawned back on me that, Kenny Easley is from Monty Smith as well. And just, I met him. He came out of games, spoke to us while I was in high school. And during college, I ran into him a few times whenever I went back home. But it was great to, see that foundation, everything he had laid in Seattle. And like I said, they didn't sign any receivers after rookie mini camp. So I went home. I started doing like in and out jobs and was doing that, working on the side and, still working out, waiting on the opportunity. And I had trained out in Arizona at IFA agency, which was at PEP, Player Enhancement Professionals out in Scottsdale. And I made a few connections out there. And it was a guy that was underneath the head agent. He was like, hey, Tim, man, I'll look out for you. If anything come across, anybody needing receivers, I'll make sure I get the information out for you. I was out there for about 3 months with a small group of guys, and I want to say out of it was 6 of us, 4 of them got drafted, and 2 of us went free agent. And, I get a call. It had to be a Wednesday, and it was from Cleveland. I'm like, all right, I was just in the kitchen making a sandwich, literally. And I got a call, Ohio. I'm like, all right, I don't know what this is. I'll answer. And I was like, hey, man, this one of the agents want to bring you in for a workout. Are you open to it? I'm like, absolutely. Like, who would say no, to an opportunity? So I ended up having a flight out that following morning. So I, told my parents, packed my stuff up. I was like, hey, I got to try out. It might be a better situation for me. So they flew me out the next morning. I went and tried out. And actually, it was funny because it was another receiver there working out with me, and he was from Richmond. So, I had on my UVA stuff. He had on Richmond stuff. I was like, man, you both from Virginia. You know what I'm saying? Cool guy. I never met him before. And I knew they needed one receiver at that point because I want to say one of the guys just got injured, so they was bringing in somebody else for that spot. And we had to work out, and I literally caught every pass. I can't think of the name of the quarterback, but he played at South Carolina, and he was throwing us passes.
Probably Connor Shaw.
Yep, that was Connor Shaw. So the first 6 passes, everything I was doing was fluent. I'm like a technician, so, I'm in and out of my break, smooth, catching the ball. And I had a deep comeback at like 20 yards, and he threw it like way inside, and I'm going towards the sideline. He kind of threw it towards the number. I really don't know how I caught it, but I reached back, snagged it, popped up, kept running. And after that, it was like, yep, that's all we need to see. So I'm like, well, I hope that's still deal for you because, at that point, you still don't know. And it was 4 of us there. It was a tight end, us 2 receivers, and I want to say it was another defensive guy, so I didn't really interact with him. But on the walk back through the facility, they took us upstairs to, like, the main part, and they were like, you guys sit here, we'll take you to the medical people, blah, blah, blah. But when I looked around, there was just 3 of us left. It was me, the tight end, and the other defensive guy. So I'm like, dang, well, I kind of wondered where the other receiver went, and at that point, they kind of already selected, who they were going to sign as long as everything checked out. So, everything checked out medically. We came back. I signed that day and got my equipment probably 30 minutes after I signed and took me to the hotel, gave me the playbook, and was like, well, we got practice tomorrow. So I'm looking at this 3-ring binder, probably about 5 inches and just played. I'm already at that point, I want to say a week behind into camp. And the following week was their first preseason game versus Detroit. I'm like, man, I got a lot of ground to make up. But at that time, I'm like, do I sleep? Do I just study plays all night? You still have full days. And, it's a quick adjustment. But, I definitely took advantage of the opportunity. I didn't lose any one-on-one while I was there. I didn't get a lot of reps in the preseason game just because I got there so late. I was there for three. So that was Detroit. The Rams that came. I had seen Rodney McLeod when we played the Rams, and then we came to D.C. and played Washington. So, I seen more in that last preseason game, but it was still counting behind the 8 ball with your Nate Burleson. They had Miles Austin at the time. They also had Taylor Gabriel. They still had Josh Gordon. So they were stacked as well. So I was just trying to find my niche. But, being behind the 8 ball, even in the return game, I'm like the 8th returner. I'm just now getting there. Everybody's been there, for at least a month and a half at this point. So, playing behind the 8 ball, I understood, but I took advantage of every opportunity I had, tried to make as many, connections I had. The assistant receiver coach, he helped me out a lot with the playbook because, of course, you just get in there and then you have a practice the next day. It's like, coach, I have no meeting before, no nothing. We just on to the fire. So took advantage of that opportunity, and I ended up getting released after the St. Louis game, I want to say, at the last cut. And, after that, it was just like a humbling feeling and just interesting to see how everything works out. My mom, my dad's a pastor, so my mom was always like, hey, everything's going to be all right. I'm like, Mom, look, I'm about 12th receiver on the roster.
Mom, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I'm like, Mom, I understand you trying to be positive, but I'm going to be realistic. I'm going to take advantage of every opportunity I have. If I make the team, I make it. But this is, yes, a better situation in Seattle, but at the same time, you can kind of feel why you're going through the vibe you're getting. Like, it was a couple of days. The head coach actually, he had ties to UVA. I can't even think of his name right now. He pulled me to the side one practice, and we were talking about UVA and everything like that. So I was doing great things, but it was like, still they had money and all this stuff tied into these other guys. So, it's hard when you're dealing with cutting the roster down, but you got a guy that just got here, and he still hasn't had the opportunity to really show himself, So took advantage of all that, and I found myself back home again in September. And at that point, I'm like, all right, well, I don't want to walk away from the game just yet because I've had my opportunity. So what should I do? So thought about it, prayed about it, and I've always worked out back at Oscar Smith. Always went back to try to, speak to the youth, and they always looked up to me. So I was always just trying to be around because, that's where I'm from. I'm trying to impact the community and help out, best way possible. So my high school coach was like, hey, Tim, you can just, come volunteer, give yourself something to do, stay around the game, come work out, and then come to practice, get my guys right, and, we'll kind of go from there until you figure out what you want to do. So I was like, all right, fine. So, I started at Oscar Smith, started volunteering, and I was there every day, to work out and go to practice. So, I'm working out with those receivers and everything and still, catching routes, lifting. So doing my own thing at the same time. And around January, February, is when the CFL tryouts start. So, somebody had already mentioned that, like, man, look, you got the speed. They have this little running start, man. Like, nobody should be able to catch you if you go and, and perfect that. So I started doing that in my workouts, implementing, the waggle and doing all these different moves and everything. And I had, I went to a trial in the University of Richmond, and those for Calgary. So I went there, I blazed the 40, man. I had 4.3, and they literally, as soon as it was over and I got in the call, they called me like, hey, man, we want you to come to Calgary, whatever. I was like, cool, we'll see. So, I still was stuck on trying to get to the NFL. So when I did have a chance to reach back out to them, they had already found another player from the States because, in Canada, you only have a certain amount of Americans on the team. So they was already like at their limit. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to start on an opportunity. Let me see, where another one is. And there was another team, Hamilton. They had a tryout in Atlanta, and I went to Atlanta, flew in, and the next day it wasn't as packed as the Calgary tryout. So the Calgary tryout was probably 100 receivers, not kidding. So, when you're doing the one-on-one routes on air, it's like, all right, you maybe get 2 or 3 reps. 3 reps, if you like get in the line, you just don't care.
Right.
But I went there and I'm looking around. I'm like, all right, well, it would end up being 30 receivers. I'm like, all right, cool. We do, 2 on each side of sliding the outside guy. Then that just bumps it down to like 6 guys in the line, 5, 6 guys. So I'm like, all right, cool, getting a lot of reps. And that workout literally at the end, like, I almost threw up. Like, I was getting so many reps. Like, I'm looking back trying to let somebody else get reps in front of me because, they wanted to see me run. So they would put me in these different spots. I forgot what number I had because, they give you the little numbers to put in your shirt. They'll say, hey, man, come get in the slot. Let me see you do this. Let me see you do that.
Mm.
And actually, let me backtrack real quick. So, fun fact, when I went to this tryout, I'm looking, and I noticed one of the quarterbacks that was with Hamilton, and I'm like, man, that dude looks familiar. So, at the beginning, they gave us like a little breakdown. Like, oh, we got one of our quarterbacks on our team now out here. And he's going to do some of the throwing because he just came on the team. So we want to see him, kind of work out as well. And that was Jacoy Harris. So I was like, man, you probably don't know me. You know my number, but I played at UVA, man. And he was like 20. And I was like, yeah, that was me, and we had made a connection before the trial even started. So he was like, man, look, when I go, if you're not in the line, I'm going to call you out. And, and that was my first time, like, actually seeing him outside of, us playing against him. But he was just throwing me down all day. And I was just killing it, catching everything. And they had ended up signing me, I want to say, within the next 2 days. And then I flew out to Canada, and we had a rookie mini camp. Same as the NFL, they do the same thing. I want to say we was out there for about 3 or 4 days, just rookies practicing. And they were trying to see who they was going to keep, who they was going to cut. So they ended up keeping me, and then went back home. Then we had to come back probably a month later for like training camp and everything. And all that went well within the return game. But same issue you're running through there, kind of deep in the return game, which would have set me apart from a few guys. And, they had Speedy Banks, Brandon Banks, who played with Washington, who has wheels. It was me, Terrell Sinkfield, who was another. All of us running like 4-3, pretty much. And it was 4 returners, and we were all just stacked. I think the first preseason game I went in, I had 3 kickoff returns for like 250 yards. Like, it was just, but that was just okay because technically we all could do the same thing. Just
right.
Different timing. But I made it to the practice squad, and dealing with, the Americans versus the Canadians, how many got on the roster, how many could play at a time, ran into that issue. But I was on the practice squad, man. I enjoyed it out in Canada. The CBA is player friendly. So, we can only have, I want to say at that time, it was either like 4 to 6 hours of the work week. So we'd go in with me for 2 hours, practice 2 hours, and be done. I'm like, this is totally different. I'm used to all day being in meetings, doing this, doing that. Because when I was in Cleveland, we were literally there from 7 to maybe 9 or 10 at night.
Right.
So I'm like, you telling me I got 4 hours now the rest of my day? And that's when I started having to make a day. So, I had to wake up early in the morning to go lift before we had meetings. And then I'll lift again after and kind of, stretch the day out and make sure I got the most out of it. And, I definitely enjoyed it, man. And after that, I got released late, almost near the end of the season. And the following year, I went to try out for another team, Edmonton Eskimos, and did well with them. Same thing. Started out with them, they signed me right after. And went for rookie mini camp, stayed on, brought me back for training camp, and going into the second, you only have 2 preseason games in Canada. So actually the week before the first preseason game, it's veteran heavy in Canada. So a lot of those guys stick around for a while. And it was one of our main receivers, and he was there for, I want to say at least like 6 or 7 years. I can't think of his name right now. And there was a situation in practice, man, where I feel like I kind of got myself cut or kind of put myself on the chopping block because we were doing like a special teams drill. And if you messed this drill up, you were going to run into the person that you were doing the drill with. It was a 2-person drill. So it was me and him. It doesn't matter who I go with. I go with the rookie. I go with the vet. It doesn't matter. I know I'm going to do my part.
Right.
So we win the drill, and we end up running dead on into each other. Boom. And, the vets, they're a little different. They're like, come on, man, I ain't out here trying to get hurt. Rookie, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, all right, man, like, I understand that, but that's not, and this is us talking after our rep. So, we going back and forth. He was like, hey, man, you doing this, blah, blah, blah. Like, he's just going off. And I'm like, first of all, that's not how the drill is ran. I was in a special teams meeting that morning that he was not in. So I know what I'm supposed to be doing. So I was explaining that to him. He was like, no, this like, he's demonstrating, like, making a big scene. And I'm like, yo, that's not it. I'm not going to just say you're right if you're wrong. Like, you're wrong. So like I said, this whole thing goes on literally for like 5 minutes to a point where they blow it up or whatever, and we just stopped the drill. So I'm like, dang, I know I ain't called the drill to stop, just because of that little conversation.
Right.
Then we go to, I want to say, receiver Indy right after. So my coach brought us up, the receiver coach, and he was kind of helping with the special team drill too. So he was around and seeing me, and I can't think of his name, man, seeing me and his interaction. And before we started our Indy, he was like, hey, man, you rookies, you guys just need to shut up, listen to the vets. Like, I don't want to see you guys go back and forth, blah, 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 making a whole deal. So I'm like, all right. I ain't say nothing because I knew I was right. When I'm right, I'm right.
Right.
So we get in the special teams meeting, and at this point, I'm like, I done put a target on my back. They probably looking at everything I do now and just marking it off. Like, yep, you need to be the one to go next or whatever. So we get in the special teams meeting. It was either that night or the following morning, and he was like, well, guys, we was running this drill wrong. And the rep that they pulled up was me and his rep. So they pulled up the rep and was like, Smith, you were right. He was wrong. And he literally looked back and was like, like, not bad, man. But, it was a distance because all the vets are sat in the front. So I was like in the 6th row. I'm like, yeah, that's cool now. But I probably just got cut because you were wrong and you were yelling at me because I was right.
Yeah, so, that stinks, man.
And that's just the way it goes. The vets, they'll have more pull, more say so. So, everybody listening, whatever the case is. So, long story short, I ended up getting injured the next week at the preseason game. We went to Calgary, and I caught a punt return. And I shouldn't have caught it because it was it was behind the 10-yard line, and that's like the punt return rules. But at this point of the game, I was just trying to, make a play. And at the same time, when you're in preseason, that's your time to shine. So I'm like, man, if I just get this one punt return all game, I'm trying to make the most of it.
It's now or never.
It's now or never, So, yeah, you can abide by the rules, but now you might not get a rep again. So I ended up going back to, like, the 6th to catch this punt. And at that point, after I caught it, nobody was blocking. So I'm like, all right, well, that kind of backfired. And, I made one guy miss. I took a shot at my back, and it bruised up pretty bad. It was like a muscle bone contusion. I really couldn't even walk. I couldn't sleep for like 2 days. And pretty much in training camp, man, if you get injured, you're getting sent home, So I knew what it was at that point. I ended up getting released. And after that, I was just pretty much, I was already working with autism high school, working with the receivers, volunteering before then anyway. So I was like, man, well, maybe that's the time because, I can't keep getting banged up like this and keep putting life on hold for me to chase this dream when I had the opportunity to, put on an NFL jersey. I had a lot of opportunities a lot of people haven't had or probably won't have, in a lifetime. So, I took it for what it was, and I just went straight on into coaching, man, wholeheartedly. And that was like my professional experience, man. It was some ups and downs, man, but, some good moments. But it was moments like, like I'm in Canada, and I'm like, man, I put a target on my back for something I knew I was correct about. But, that's just the way it goes sometimes.
That's a funny story, Tim. Looking at your Instagram page, I was really excited to see that you roomed with Tequan Underwood up in Canada. He had over He had 1,100 receiving yards his junior year at Rutgers. I absolutely loved watching Tequan Underwood play college football. Talk to me about rooming with Tequan Underwood, dude.
Oh, man. So that was when I was in Hamilton. So, like I said, when they brought the rookies in, that was his first year in the CFL as well. So technically he was a rookie, even though he played in the league for 6-7 years. So I got to the room actually before he did, and they had like little playbooks and like per diem money and envelopes on our bed. So I was like, all right, I had to walk by his bed to get to mine. So I peeked over to see who I was rooming with, and it was like T. Underwood. I'm like, that name sounds familiar.
Yeah, he was good, man.
So, he walked into the room with his high top, and I'm like, yeah, I know exactly who this is. So introduced myself to him or whatever, and cool guy, man, and we just took off from there friendship-wise, man, and we were in there studying together, and we got real tight to a point where 2 weeks in the training camp, my roommate got cut. So Ty, he was like, bro, I'm about to room with you. I was like, man, come on. So we moved all this stuff, and we roomed together again for the rest of training camp, and cool guy, man. That's my dog. We talk probably once, twice a week, up until this point. And it was funny because he called me roommate because he didn't know my name when he first came in.
Hey, you!
Yeah, it was like roommate for like 3 months, and it was funny because like the next day in practice, I want to say we were doing something. He was like, "Hey, roommate," and I was looking. I was like, "Yeah," and that's his way. That's just what he always called me. Like, hey, roommate. And that's what it was. Whether he was walking down the hall, about to go, because, the food was okay during camp. So we used to always go to this little Wendy's around the corner. And he used to walk down the hall like, yo, roommate, about to go to Wendy's. I'm like, all right, about to. And we always was rolling, man. And once training camp was over with, we had to find our own spot or whatnot in Canada. So we found our spot, and it was me, him, and Jacoy Harris living together, one of the other receivers, man. So we had, a great house, man, and, that's my guy. And once he made his transition into coaching, it was one of those things where, we were just talking, and I was like, man, look, a lot of people. A lot of people know you. You was a heck of a receiver. So, if you want to, he's a very personal person and likes helping people. So it's like, let's go ahead, help the youth, man, jump into it, and we can kind of go from there. And he talked to a few people, and I tried to help him out, put him in contact with some people, and he landed at Lafayette. And the picture that you've seen was they came and played Delaware. That was 2 years ago, I want to say, or 3 seasons ago. They came and played Delaware, which is only probably like 30 minutes from the school that I was coaching at. So I went to the game, went and seen them, in action and everything. And, yeah, man, we still tight to this day. I actually went up to Rutgers last month to, go check on him. He just had his third daughter. So, went to see her, man, and that's my dog, man.
Yeah, dude. I absolutely loved watching him play. I mean, that Rutgers team had Tequan Underwood, Kenny Britt. They both went over 1,000 receiving yards that year, and they had the man, the myth, the legend, Ray Rice. God, I mean, what a team, man. And Mike Teal was pretty underrated too, man. I really loved watching those Rutgers teams play, man. I'm a college football junkie, so when I saw like you were hanging around Tequan Underwood, I'm like, man, I got to hear about this guy. Like, God, he made some absolutely spectacular catches during his days at Rutgers.
Absolutely, man. I told him he's a living legend. Now he's back, he's back at home because he was with the Dolphins last season. So, he had the opportunity to come back home. And I'm like, man, that's you. Rutgers is you, so you go back home, that's East, so I'm glad to see him, still doing well, man, and taking it from there.
Let's flash back to the state title game, Tim, when you had 6 catches for 224 yards and 4 TDs in the state title game. Was that a game for you that really stood out as a game of flow for you and being in the zone?
Yeah, It was definitely a slow game because a lot of people don't know. I actually scored 5, but my last one got called back. So, that fifth one actually would have put me over. I would have been the number one person to have 5 touchdowns in Virginia history in the state championship game, but instead it ended up tying me with Percy Harvin for like 4. So, I was kind of salty about that after the fact. I didn't know. I didn't think about stats, anything like that, in high school during the moment. But looking back at it, it should have been 5. But but that game, it was one of those things where we had a purpose for that game that entire season. Losing a teammate the season before who was supposed to win the Virginia State, who was a close friend of ours, me and Perry, and everybody else on the team as well. And we were pretty much on a mission all season. Like, it wasn't no talk. It wasn't no back and forth. We literally showed up, and we grind every single day. Got to shout out my head coach, Coach Morgan. We had weightlifting as a class. So, man, we used to live on game days. We used to, be on a whole different level than a lot of other people. So, when it was time to line up on Friday, we had already played the game at least 2 or 3 times that week, between scrimmages, going 1 versus 1s, and, him putting us in different situations throughout the week. Pretty much it was set. So, now it was just a matter of playing the game. And Osborne was like that Cinderella team that year that I want to say they either came in at like 6-4 or like at 7th or 8th seed and literally just swept all the high seeds to get to the state championship game. So, they were a sneaky team that was hot at that point. But, going into the game at that point, I laughing jokes with Rio Walker because the 2 days before that we played Bethel and they had Rio text me and I scored 4 touchdowns on Rio. So with him coming to UVA, we always joked about that all the time. But there were quite some times where the game before that we played Otis and they had somebody pressing me. They had a linebacker shaded over me and a safety. So I'm like, all right, well, I can see, these different game plans are really, you was either going to try to stop me or try to stop Perry. You couldn't do both. It was one or the other, So in that game, they were just trying to stop me. So we ended up coming out of that game, I want to say 10-7. That was a dogfight for sure. And, going to the state championship game, it was interesting to see what their game plan was. So coming out, they literally played man coverage. So I'm looking at my coach. He's looking at me, and I'm like, Coach, he's not checking me. He's not checking me. So my coach, he was just a football first guy. I want to say my first touchdown actually was me in the slot at the top, and we bumped Perry out to an empty set just to see what they were going to do, and they moved the corner with Perry. So now I'm like, now you match me up with a linebacker safety? That's not happening. So that was the first one, and then from then on, it was just literally man covered. And a lot of people probably watched us play a lot, but they didn't dissect the film. And then sometimes I was literally the only receiver going out on the route. So it's like it was either him throwing it to me or nothing. So I'm like, if I'm looking at it on the back end in certain situations, I'm either doubling him, giving him some type of help, pressing, holding. I'll take the penalty over touchdown, something. But, they just played true to their coverage and what they, did all season. And, it just didn't work out for them. But, playing that man coverage, man, I was just running by guys. I think I knew I was in the zone because the third touchdown I had, I want to say, the ball was tipped. The guy, he actually tipped it, but he tipped it right to me. So I'm like, all right, yep. Hey, once it started falling into play like that, it is destined. So, I was always a team first guy too. So honestly, a lot of us guys that were starters, we wanted to see the young guys play. So pretty much every week we used to try to kill everybody in the first half, unbuckle our pads, and, watch everybody else play at that point. So, I'm serious. And it happened that game too. Like I played the first series, I want to say, in the third quarter, and that was it. I scored 4 touchdowns, really 5, in 2 quarters and the drop. That was it. So that was definitely a flow game. It could have got a lot worse. And that's like one of the arguments whenever I go back home and we start talking about, ball. It was, hey, or even with my players, hey, Coach Tim, well, this dude had more touchdowns than you or more yards or whatever. Because I coached that same year after going to Cleveland. I coached 2 receivers that actually, both of them broke my catch record at the school because I had 73 catches. I want to say one ended with like 80, the other ended with like 100. Like I was on them guys and, we were rolling. But, I tell them, man, it's different when you don't play the whole second half and them guys are playing full games. Like that 4 touchdowns could have been 10. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was definitely a flow game. And we were playing at Virginia Tech, and I was never really a fan of Virginia Tech, so I had to kind of make a statement there, too.
That's funny, man.
Listening to the Flow Theory Podcast. You can listen to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and TuneIn.